De 21ste eeuw wordt de eeuw van China. Aan die mening kun je geen buil meer vallen. En inderdaad, de spectaculaire groei maakt het land tot de motor en tot de bankier van de wereldeconomie. Maar wat weten we nu echt over China? Hoe kijken Chinezen naar zichzelf en naar ons? Wat zijn de Chinese denkpatronen? En hoe verhouden die meer dan 1 miljard mensen zich tot de waarden die wij zo graag universeel noemen? Tegenlicht gaat 3 weken lang op zoek naar de ziel van China. Vanavond een lesje filosofie uit het Rijk van het Midden.
Terwijl overal op de wereld autocratische regimes schudden op hun grondvesten, groeit China onverstoorbaar verder. Inmiddels is China tegelijk de motor en de reddingsboei van de wereldeconomie. Als gevolg van onze eigen geschiedenis denken we in het Westen altijd dat economische ontwikkeling gepaard moet gaan met politieke vrijheid. Dus zou ook China zich uiteindelijk in de richting van het westers ideaal moeten bewegen. Maar is dat wel zo? Wat denkt China? Met deze eigenlijk onmogelijke vraag in het achterhoofd bekijk ik een immens populair televisieprogramma. En ga ik in gesprek met professor Tu Weiming. Dat programma en de professor hebben één opzienbarende overeenkomst. Om antwoorden te formuleren voor de toekomst vestigen ze de aandacht op de Chinees wijsgerige traditie. Vanuit de vraag die meer dan ooit van belang is. Wat denkt China?
Well, this is something that I've been thinking about. It's not only a very challenging, thought-provoking question, I think it's also a rich question. So I think the best way out is try first to offer maybe a rough definition, what I think China thinks. China, in my view, I talk about culture China rather than China as a political entity. China doesn't think, but the Chinese people do. And I think it's presumptuous for me to sort of think on behalf of the Chinese farmers. We're talking about 800 million, and out of the 800 million, maybe 200 million moved recently from the countryside to the urban centers. I'm sure they think, first of all, their own livelihood, their existence, but also if they manage to maintain certain subsistence, they would like to become more prosperous. It's a long process. So I have to say that China thinks, in my view, I can only talk about the Chinese intellectuals, but not the government. I want to talk about the intellectuals in general. There are intellectuals, of course, in the government, but also in business, in mass media, in the academic community, and in all kinds of social organizations. But most of these intellectuals are not particularly interested in China's future, frankly. They're more concerned about their own professions, their own careers, their own livelihoods, and of course their own families. But they are what may be called popular intellectuals. These are the people who are politically concerned. They don't have to go into politics, but socially very much engaged and culturally sophisticated, at least informed or sensitive. So I think what I would like to do is how this group of people think as a representative of China thinks, small representative of the whole group, but in the long run can be very consequential because these are the leaders. There are 3 major currents of thought in China. Socialism, as I pointed out, official ideology, but Western ideas, especially liberalism and Confucian humanism. These are 3 major ideological forces. If everything works out, that liberalism will continue to flourish in China by advocating the importance of the market. Socialism is interested in distribution, not just distributive justice, but distribution of wealth. The poor and the rich, the gap should be bridged, and it should lean toward the underprivileged. So now they say, well, we have to do a lot about the farmers to rebuild the farming community. Confucianism is for cultural identity. You cannot say Marxism is for cultural identity. Marxism is so recent. Confucianism has been shaping Chinese culture for centuries. Well, revival of traditional Chinese culture, specifically Confucianism, has been a major intellectual movement in China. Parents encourage the children to memorize Confucian classics. And then the TV, national TVs, and actually all kinds of lectures, presentations, storytellings about the Confucian tradition being presented. And one book on the Analects, a personal view on the Analects by Professor Yu Dan of Peking Normal University, was sold more than 1 million in a very short period of time. It broke all records of the publications.
So there's an enormous demand for the knowledge for Confucius. Yu Dan is het equivalent van Oprah Winfrey. Net als Oprah koppelt ze populisme en emotie aan een soort herontdekking van de eigen cultuur. En dat heeft haar een sterrenstatus opgeleverd. In haar populaire wekelijkse televisieshow leidt ze een miljoenenpubliek door de culturele geschiedenis. Ze legt uit hoe films en liedjes de heersende ideologie hebben verwoord. En tot mijn grote verbazing breekt ze daarbij een lans voor de traditie van het Confucianisme. Een traditie die door de communisten zo goed als uitgeroeid was en die je op het eerste gezicht weinig kans van slagen zou geven in de nieuwe tijd van de jacht op het grote geld. Maar dat blijkt toch anders. Zo biedt de show van Yu Dan een intrigerend kijkje in hoe China vandaag de dag met het beeld van zichzelf omgaat.
那你比如说中国人的当下，每一个人有多元的角色，每一个人压力都很大，都很困惑。我相信就在世界的传播中也是一样。你去看看太多的人，起码同时身上会承载着3个角色，起码有这3个角色。第一是他的职业角色。 因为人都有自己的岗位，你要去谋生，要去付出。第二是他的伦理角色，因为你起码还有自己的亲人，还有朋友要有交往。第三一个是自我生命角色，因为你除了为职业尽心、为亲人尽责之外，你毕竟还有自己的梦想，还有自己的追求和自己充电的方式。那你这3个角色经常在争夺你的时间，经常在冲突，对吧？ 那么你再去看中国古人讲的道理，为什么在今天是有用的？大家都了解孔子讲的“君子3省吾身”哦，每天大家要反省自己，反省哪几件事呢？孔子正好说了3件事。他说：“为人谋而不忠乎？”谋生的谋，为人谋就是在社会上有自己的职业去做事，就要问问我今天有没有不忠诚。与朋友交而不信乎？ 那么，跟自己的亲人朋友交往中，有没有答应的事情没有守诺言的？有没有不守信用？传不习乎？传就是我说我教的传播学。这个世界上充满了各式各样渠道来的信息，但习就是自我学习，把外在信息转化成自己的生命经验。那么，我今天有没有通过学习而使自己提升了、成长了？ 我们那时候经常唱一首歌，叫《时刻准备着》，就是唱我们是共产主义少先队的队员。我一直觉得，60年代和70年代长大的孩子，是在贫瘠的生活中拥有着丰富的情感世界。这批人不管去干什么，他还是能够有一种意志的力量。精神焕发。有一点最好的东西，就是他信任集体和荣誉，他信任红领巾。所以你知道那个时候最严厉的惩罚是什么？不是罚站，不是打扫卫生，而是老师说，你把红领巾摘下来。我们那个时候。 如果说有什么跟这个国家、跟这个民族、跟集体的利益相关的标志，那就是我们从小戴着红领巾。像那天边的朝霞一样灿烂，我们心中的
精神焕发，就别慌了。
我们小时候体会的是一种时代情感，是一种关于英雄主义和浪漫主义的情感。我记得我小的时候特别喜欢智取威虎山，我一直庆幸有杨子荣这样一个英雄，拯救了我们关于英雄的成功梦想。
嘿嘿，防冷涂的蜡。
我们会知道董存瑞用他的自己身体做支架去托起炸药包。
为了新中国，前进！为了新中国，前进！前进！前进！前进！
所有这些人其实只有一个名义，就是为了新中国。几千年前的中国文明里面有大量的部分已经随着时间的推移失去了它的应用价值，比如说关于礼教，比如说某些对于女性的歧视，这些东西都过去了。那么我们能不能够找到那些对今天还有价值的部分，把它跟今天的生活结合起来？我要做的事情不是带着今天的人走过远古的隧道，重新回到遥远的从前，而是把古圣先贤请过那条蒙着尘埃的隧道，来到今天，在情感上跟我们完成一个好的交流。这就是我努力在做的事情。
Learning requires experiential understanding, so you have to gradually acquire a great deal of experience. The Confucian world consists of the following geographic areas: China, not just mainland China, but Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, because Singapore, even though it's not part of China politically, it consists of more than 70% or so ethnic Chinese. Japan, Korea, both South Korea and North Korea, and Vietnam. This area is called the Confucian worldview. Confucius, as learner, is quite conscious that learning involves not only to learn or the acquisition of knowledge or acquisition of skills, but to learn about yourself. Learning is character building. Therefore, in the Analects, one of the great classics of the Confucian tradition, learning is for the sake of the self, not for others. You don't learn for others. You learn for yourself. You build up your character. And this kind of learning is called the learning of the body and mind. Learning how to be able to realize yourself. This kind of learning requires learning, relearning, and a difficult concept, unlearning. Sometimes you have to forget about what you learned, the bad habits, for example. And how to forget, how to unlearn is as challenging as learning and, of course, as relearning. I established a center for the study of Confucian entrepreneur and East Asian culture at Zhejiang University. And I actually, time and time again, try to impress on some of the best CEOs. You know, I would say they call a Confucian entrepreneur, meaning those people who are public intellectuals in the business community. I said, you have to learn from Japan. You have to learn from Korea. Japan is noted for these great Confucian entrepreneurs. These are all Confucian countries. Mm-hmm. China had to learn.
Yeah. And what, if you could explain in a few words, is so important in Confucianism that attracts these business people to follow the courses?
I think from the Confucian perspective, those who are more powerful, more influential, more endowed with resources and ideas, information, ought to feel more obligated for the well-being of the society. Confucianism as a spiritual humanism is interested in 4 dimensions of the human experience. One is the question of the self as a central relationship, the integration of the body and mind, for example. through self-cultivation. The second one is the interaction between the self and the community. But community variously understood as the family, neighborhood, nation, and the world. Third one is the relationship between human species and nature. And finally, this relationship between the human heart and mind and the weight of heaven. This rather comprehensive humanism is a spiritual humanism because it pays attention to heaven, the spirituality of human race. The belief is that the ultimate values ought to be realized in ordinary human existence. It can be as well. It is very different from the idea of the economic man, as Adam Smith. I think it's even a distorted version of Adam Smith's notion. An economic man is someone who is critically aware of his, now also her, self-interest. And a rational animal tries to maximize his profit in the marketplace adjudicated by law. Some of the great Western values, such as liberty, rationality, legality, and individuality, these are expressed in the idea of the economic man. But the economic man is not a responsible member of the community. You have the Enron case, you have all these financial giants with Goldman Sachs and so forth. They're so totally irresponsible. And compassion is not part of their mental outlook. And certainly no civility. They feel they're very proud to earn, say, 1,000 times as high as an average worker. That's not true in Japan. The highest would be six times or even lower. That's Korea is different. So it's different culture. And
in China?
In China, right now, it's just totally out of control. And, well, that's why the people are angry. The net people in particular. Whenever there's a conflict between rich man and poor man, you know that net people will criticize this rich man no matter what.
那我想，我们仔细去观察我们的生活形态，有很多时候，大家生活的格局方式都是由你自己文化的基因决定的。为什么在欧洲你会看到大量的哥特式建筑？为什么它是那样一个高耸入云的个体？它呈现出一种崇高优美，一个个体像神、像天空的膜拜。但是你看中国的建筑，从来没有那么高的，都是低低的，但是它一定是群体建筑，不是个体的。中国的老百姓家里都是四合院，那么最重要的老人要住在阳光的北房里，兄弟在两边排列。在皇帝的紫禁城里面，再多的房子也是这样按秩序排列，它是在群体中体现伦理的秩序。这两种方式其实反映了它的传统，因为西方有天主教、基督教文明，每个人在上教堂的时候，他永远是一个被救赎的个体，向神、向主要求着一种提携的力量。这种状态是神圣的、崇高的，我们理解它的价值。但是中国人说上阵亲兄弟，出门父子兵，他是崇尚伦理秩序的，所以他一定是群体的，他要求这样一种向大地环抱的伦理归属。所以我说开玩笑，我说为什么遇到一件事情，一个美国人本能的就会说 "Oh my God"， 一个中国人本能的会说"哎呦我的妈呀"，这就是一种差异。中国人不会在遇到一件事的时候去喊神，因为他从小没有个体敬神的传统。而美国人从小就独立了，也不会遇到一件事情去喊妈，这是什么呢？这是文明的差异，但你永远不可以说它有高下之分。
I'm sorry. I thought I finished my task, but this is supposed to be dialogue, so I should entertain a few questions.
Could you please comment, in the about 10 years in the 60s to the mid-70s, China went through a cultural revolution, and Confucius was attacked, and even pictures and statues of him were smashed, and it was a low point. And could you please comment on perhaps how do you assess the tenacity of Chinese civilization and Confucius himself for this wonderful resurgence and respect he's gained? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this gives me a good opportunity to say something I should have said. I didn't get a chance to do it. Now, if you look at the Confucian tradition, like Hinduism or Buddhism, it evolved over a very long period of time. Confucius was born in a local place we call Qufu. China is certainly open to the temptation of individualism. Now, within the Confucian tradition, learning is for the sake of the self, not for others. The idea, Chinese all like to be bosses. They call it, it's better for us to be the head of a chicken than the end of a cow, because I want to be in charge. I want to be a boss. So that's very powerful. On the other hand, the Chinese in general have a tremendous resiliency against foreign powers or against adversarial situations from the outside. So this, not collective, this communal sense of being part of a much larger universe and this individualist quest for one's own well-being. And of course, we call it nepotistic notion, care for our families, but not anyone who's outside of families. These two forces continue to interact among them, between themselves. And so what you see China, I would say, is a restless landscape, but also it's a very complex society.
Mm-hmm. So do I understand you well that you say that the government has put the family in the center position of society and the importance of the family? Or is it a longer tradition?
Throughout Chinese history. But in the modern times, one important feature, that's why the disintegration of the Chinese order was this concerted effort on the part of the communist movement, especially Mao, to destroy the family. If you destroy the family, you could have all these people to be mobilized as individuals. So you undermine the importance of the family, you identify with the state. Sometimes you undermine the state, identify with the party. Sometimes undermine the party, identify with Mao himself. So this is totally against Chinese tradition. And this has led to disastrous consequences. After the founding of the People's Republic, until the so-called reform and open policy of the late 1970s, every 5-year period, if something dramatically changed, upheavals or ruptures. The Korean War, the Great Leap Forward, the 3 terrible years of starvation. According to one account, maybe 30 million people died of starvation. And then, of course, the early part and later part of the Cultural Revolution. These were horrible years. Chinese lost their sense of direction. Chinese in general, especially intellectuals, became humiliated.
Picture of Mao Zedong taken off Tiananmen Square.
Still there.
It's still there, but when will they take it off?
Oh, that I don't know. The people still have tremendous respect for Mao. Some people on the countryside, Mao was deified. Anyway, and a new kind of statue has been built. That's Confucius statue. An erected Confucius statue around Tiananmen at the National Historical Museum of China.
How is the state ideology related to this undercurrent?
Well, frankly, Mao was very much an anti-Confucian. He really hated Confucianism. He hated his father, and he considered his father as a representative for hierarchy, male chauvinism, and authoritarianism. And I don't think the government is willing to say, let's accept Confucianism as the national ideology of the country, even though some of the radical Confucians are now advocating it. The government still makes it very clear this is a socialist country, Marxism, Leninism, but not Stalinism is part of our legacy. The Chinese leadership, in general, the mentality has been shaped by the Enlightenment mentality, the secular Enlightenment mentality, and to say by materialism, by the Marxist insensitivity to religious matters. So the ruling ideology in China, as I see it, is scientism, not enlightenment. Enlightenment is broader. The scientism is based upon this mentality that everything that is not touchable, not quantifiable, not observable is not real. So this mentality is absolutely overwhelming in the academic community. Most of the presidents of universities are engineers. Some of them are people in basic sciences, and very few people in the humanities or social sciences. So this is the mentality. With this mentality, religion is unconsciously considered as superstition. Or you can ignore religion, so what? It's an outmoded stage of human development, from religion to metaphysics to science. Without knowing, this is the common knowledge. If a person is a believer, you just cannot buy him through, sort of seduce him by material gains. You cannot oppress him by political means. Even if you use the military might to crush him, you're in trouble. Look at Christianity and the Roman Empire. So this is something I think the government leadership is trying to learn. They want to learn religion. But their way of learning religion is narrow-minded. It's instrumental. How can we deal with religion? Or how can we use religion for promoting our national interest and so forth?
国家博物馆北门广场昨天举行了孔子塑像落成仪式。
新落成的孔子塑像总高9.5米，塑像以简朴概括的手法，将人体的结构融入自然的山石形态当中。著名雕塑家吴为山是这座孔子像的作者。10多年来，他先后塑造过很多尊不同造型的孔子。
总有一些记忆是关于一个时代里面永恒的信物，它一定镌刻在那里，不因为时光磨洗而失去它当年的那种鲜亮和隽永。因为它对于我们来讲是那个年纪的人生教科书，所有爱情可以在他的歌里找到，所有的那种爱情的骄傲、爱情的甜蜜、失恋的痛楚、孤单和那种对爱的那种承诺，都在他的歌里能找。
我现在身上还有5块钱，5块钱结婚也够了。
是在那个电影里。我想，我们大概有一代人脑子里面永远都镌刻着，这个冯青兰在山路上把她的红围巾盖在板车上，盖在她爱人的身上，白雪茫茫，然后只有那一条红围巾，在雪地里面有一种耀眼的美。我们那个时候呢是10几岁上中学的孩子，突然之间，爱情这件事，光天化日之下摆到了你的眼前。对我们这些青春期的少男少女来讲，真是有点猝不及防，但是又觉得满眼金光绚烂。我们那个时候突然看到，就是《甜蜜的事业》里边有女跑男追的慢镜头了。然后呢，听到那个主题歌可以唱爱情的花朵了。中国人的这种爱情故事里面哈，有太多太多的东西，观念、行为，表面上都在变化。但是它有一层深深的根脉是一直没有变的， 执子之手，与子偕老。是现在的年轻人对于西方文化接受的程度，甚至有时候超过了中国的传统文化。我之所以敢讲这句话，因为我的身份是一个大学老师，我每天在面对自己的本科生、硕士生、博士生，他们的年龄大概都从18、19岁到25、26岁之间。应该说，在我们现代的大学教育系统中，是广泛的有西方文明的基础，而从生活方式上来讲，他们会上互联网，他们会打游戏机，他们会跟美国人同时看到好莱坞的大片，那么他们热爱麦当劳和肯德基。即使是中共在召开最高规格的领导会议的时候，中共的领袖们几乎都是穿西装的，而不是穿中式的服装。所以我想，西方文明方式现在已经跟中国的生活方式融为一体。对年轻一代来讲，他们的接受的程度和开放的心态应该是畅通无阻的。
When we talk about Asian values, we actually don't really know what is meant with it.
Not only that, I think when the term Asian values are used, when the term is used, it is often in a negative sense. It's an excuse for doing something against Western values. Let's take the case of human rights. How is human right as an idea implemented in China? First of all, we have to understand human rights are not static structures. It's a dynamic process. First generation, second generation, now we enter into the third generation. The first generation human rights are exclusively concerned about political rights. But that's not the UN Declaration. The UN Declaration is comprehensive. So the second generation is about economic and social rights. The third generation is about culture and group rights. If you say political rights are absolutely critical, the Chinese will say, we think maybe economic rights are more important. You criticize us for too much emphasis on authoritarian concern. We want to criticize you as being unable to spread the wealth. You have multinational corporation leaders earning about 1,000 times of ordinary. You have homeless people. You never apply human rights to homeless people. They're homeless because they don't work hard, because the situation is bad. But in China, let's say if we manage to get a lot of people that would be able to have the subsistence, this is our expression of human rights. So human rights should be exercised differently in different cultural contexts.
They came out
from the West.
From the West, the Enlightenment, French
Absolutely.
Revolution.
But my own view is that you put all these values together, they are not sufficient for the human race to move into the 21st century. They're not enough. Not only not enough, if you look at the Enlightenment sort of movement, you know, I actually wrote a paper on Beyond the Enlightenment, because the Enlightenment movement, even though created some of these great values, but also flawed in the most serious way. That's why in the last 50 years, some of the most brilliant minds in the West, the feminists, the environmentalists, the communitarianists, the people who advocated religious pluralism, they all fought against the Enlightenment, because Enlightenment is anthropocentric, aggressive towards nature, no sensitivity towards the spiritual realm, towards religion. That's not good enough for the 21st century. Many other values are needed. What are these values? These are not Asian values. These are values rooted in Asia, rooted in Confucianism, but they are universal values. I call it the global significance of local knowledge. What are these values? Sympathy, empathy, compassion, which Confucians say commiseration, civility, not just legality, you have civility. Not just rights, you have responsibility, right? Not just individual dignity, you have social harmony. Not just liberty, you have justice. So the time is ripe for a real dialogue between core values in human civilization.
我在读博士的时候，我的外语老师是一个年轻的华裔美国女孩，她生在美国，长在美国，其实不会说中文。那她的父母呢，让她回来在大学里面做一份兼职，就是为了让她也跟我们有一个交流。这个年轻的小老师呢，非常开朗，非常活泼，我们大家都很喜欢她，年龄也都差不多，甚至比我们还要小一点。所以呢，到了大家新年联欢会的时候，我们的班长就去问他说：“老师啊，我们要办一个大的联欢会，你参加不参加？”他说：“好啊，好啊，我当然要参加。”然后我们的班长呢，就到我们中间，按照中国的习惯要排节目单了，就问每一个人：“你是唱歌，你是跳舞，是给你排在第3个，还是排在第6个？”这样认真排下来，又去问我们的老师：“老师，你要告诉我你要演什么节目，要把你排在第几个？”然后小老师很诧异地看着他，看了一会儿，突然就很生气，说：“我不参加了，你告诉我是联欢呢。我们大家都很即兴，我们在一起很快乐，是吗？你为什么要弄出一个东西来限制我？你一定要问我表演什么，你还要给我排定顺序，这是联欢吗？”那个瞬间10几年了，我脑子里面印象非常深刻。我想中国的学生是很善意的请老师，美国的老师是很真诚的来参加节目，他们双方都没有错，但文化习惯不同。所以你想有意思吗？我们现在世界文明的冲突有时候过于敏感，我们把太多的东西可能泛政治化、泛意识形态化，我们夸大了文化的冲突，但其实你没有尊重它生长的土壤。
I think China is at a critical juncture. China can move into the kind of idea state that I want China to, wishful thinking perhaps. China can also degenerate. Economic chaos, political disintegration, mass movements, no directions whatsoever. Not only China will suffer, I think East Asia and the rest of the world will suffer.
So if it collapses now, everybody will notice?
Everybody, not just notice, we will suffer. We'll suffer here. We'll suffer everywhere. And it could be disastrous for the world. That's why I think, we know that America should not fail because the power of the dollar. If America fails economically, everybody suffers. But I think China now is in a steady state of developing its own economic base, its cultural base. So I think this notion about China as a monolithic entity, controlled by the party, once the party fails to control, China collapse. I don't think that will happen. A good friend of mine, Scalapino, noted professor at UC Berkeley, he's predicting China's disintegration for the last 40 years. He's still predicting. It will take a while. It's a different kind of system. We now know Egypt, Tunisia, all these societies change because of the Facebook and what's that. This may happen to China. I doubt it. I doubt it very much. And they say, wow, China may be strong in controlling all these networks. That's not the case at all. There's such a powerful consensus. So everybody's in this together. China has been blessed with 30 years or so of relative peace. So the whole society flourished. Everybody has gained something. So the government has captured the imagination of the people, say stability is absolutely critical. Now, I say the government is nervous, is saying stability is perhaps the premium value of the political order. And give you one example, this is maybe a rumor, I don't know. And the money, the budget from the government to control domestically, to maintain a stable society, is higher than the military budget. That's perhaps the only one or two that is able to do that. It's difficult to imagine that. I don't know the situation in the United States, but anyway. So the government is nervous about it, but most of the intellectuals, including the public intellectuals, with a few radical people, consider stability is a value that will have to be maintained. So the idea of harmony is really an extension of that. Harmony meaning, well, all these conflicts will have to be controlled, even eliminated. After the Tiananmen tragedy, many students left China, and some of the most brilliant ones, and became dissidents and stayed in the States. And I met quite a few of them. And I talked about the experience in Taiwan. And they were fascinated by what may be called the democratization of Taiwan. So I posed this question. I said, if the democratization in Taiwan leads to Taiwan's independence, what is your reaction? We're going to fight against it. We just cannot allow Taiwan to become alienated from Chinese territory. You know, China suffered so much. Taiwan was colonized by Japan, returned to China after 1949. We're going to fight against this kind of situation. I said, no, there are two values. One is independence, the other one is democratization. One is sovereignty, I guess. So you consider sovereignty much more important than independence or freedom or democracy? They said, you bet, we are. So that to me was a very interesting signal. In general, the Chinese people are very rational. That's true in Taiwan and true in China. They know their self-interest. They can be very vocal, but when they know this will lead to some kind of chaotic situation, they have self-restraint. And China is not controlled by brute force. China is controlled by ethos, by all kinds of maneuvers.
中国的几大爱情故事里面，《梁祝》为什么会被改编的很多？因为《梁祝》大概是这些故事里面就是浪漫气质很强烈的一个故事，它里面有悲剧，但是这个悲剧中呢，让人觉得有希望。要做快乐的自己，照顾自己，就算某天一个人孤寂，要做快乐的自己。
That's what we can expect for the next 100 years from China. To see China return to this great power status?
Not at all. I think it's a misconception. You know, ever since I was a graduate student in Harvard, Fairbank was a major promoter of that idea, the Middle Kingdom idea, meaning China just cannot believe that China is not superior to any other powers. So China will have to be on top to feel secure. That's not the case at all. I don't think power is the right word. The way of exercising power is through influence, especially cultural influence. So for a long time, the Chinese court received tributes, you know, tributary delegations, missions to China. And the idea of assimilation the Mongols conquered China. And in one generation, the Mongols became Sinicized. So this power assimilation is the strength. I think if you use Joe Nye's idea of soft power, the soft power is not simply using it instrumentally. The soft power is precisely the cultural norms and the values of Chinese society were emulated around. And China, you know, if you say there's a great ambition of the Chinese people, particularly the intellectuals, where China will emerge not simply as economic power or military power, as a cultural force. And this cultural force will be important for the human community as a whole. This is my vision about the Confucian tradition.
De komende weken zoomen we verder in op China. Eerst met een portret van een klein politiebureau op een van de drukste spoorwegstations van het land. Hier komen we de noden en problemen van de kleine man tegen. En zien we hoe laconiek en pragmatisch wordt geprobeerd te helpen of te sussen. Overigens zonder zicht op enige daadwerkelijke verbetering. Van de noodverbanden van alle dag schakelen we naar de ring van het grote gevecht. Google versus China. Wat ging er precies mis tussen het symbool van de moderne westerse e-culture enerzijds en de geheimzinnige reus van het oosten anderzijds? Een verhaal over de verbanden tussen zaken en politiek, waarbij de ongeschreven regels het zwaarst wegen. En wij toegang kregen waar we het zelf niet hadden verwacht. Bij internetgigant Baidu, de Chinese tegenhanger van Google.